Welcome to the fourth chapter of the book of 2 Kings. Continue in the life of Elisha, and it begins, and one wife from the sons of the prophet, Geni. The same word is used for a woman, but only through context can you tell which one it is, and then sometimes it's difficult if you don't really know the idioms of the Hebrews and what situations it would be a wife or a woman. But I'm just letting you know that this is the case. Here, a wife, I don't think it would be, because this mentions one of the sons of the sons of the prophets, the propheton. These were these men that were around Elisha, saw Elijah go up, and she yelled to Elisha, saying, "Your bondman, my husband." Now, a man and a husband is also the same word, anir. So she could say, "Your bondman, my man," but that wouldn't go because it's a husband, died. And so when you go through the Bible and you see these words for man and woman, know also as a wife and a husband. And you know that your bondman was fearing the Lord. And the money lender came to take my two sons for a bondman to himself, a duo, because he apparently owed money, interest, and they could take your children to work for him, or be slaves, I suppose. And Elisha said to her, "What should I do for you or to you? Announce it to me. What is there to you in the house?" And she said, "Well, there's not to your bondwoman one thing in the house, only a vessel of olive oil in the house of which I anoint with." And he said to her, "Go, and you ask for yourself vessels from outside, from all of your neighbors, empty vessels, and not a few. And you shall enter and lock the door after you and after your sons, and you shall pour out into the vessels, and the one being filled you shall take away." Okay. She went forth from him and did thus. They've seen miracles by Elisha, so she is going along with his instructions. And she locked the door after herself and after her sons. And they drew near to her to help, and she poured until the vessels were filled. And she said to her sons, "Oh, bring near to me a vessel." And they said to her, "There's not yet a vessel." And the olive oil stopped. And she came and reported. There's apingule, where I have mentioned the alpha and the gamma here. Has so many times, it has to do with, from angel, a messenger, a message. Here, a report. She came and reported, the verb, to the man of God. That's Elisha. Calls him the man of God here from on for a while. And he said to her, "Well, go and render the olive oil for sale, and pay your interest, and you and your sons shall live by the rest." So apparently there was a lot of oil that was made here. Now, in our list here of the miracles, we see the multiplies the widow's oil. And I put the haul of the fishes. There didn't have any, and then when Jesus came, he allowed them to catch all these fish, giant haul of these fish. And came a day, and Elisha passed over into Sonam, and there was a great woman there, a Geni, you could say wife, but a great woman. Now, she was a wife, but you wouldn't say a great wife. Just in English, it doesn't go. And she took hold of him to eat bread. So he came by there, and it came to pass whenever it was fit for him to enter, that he turned aside to eat bread. So she was doing an act of kindness. A lot of women do. My mother made knitted things for the church, and women have quilted in Mennonite church I used to go to, and they'd sell these quilts and make money and give it away, or help pay for the church expenses and so forth. And this woman here had a good heart, and she would feed him whenever he came by. And the woman said to her Andra, there's a husband, she didn't say man, husband, oh, behold, indeed, I know that this is a holy man of God who travels unto us continually. He comes by. I know he's a holy man of God. Boy, who would know that anymore today? I can't imagine anybody. Maybe he was dressed a certain way and did certain things. Men have done that for thousands of years. Clergy dresses in a certain way, or even brothers in a monastery, they all wear, robes and so forth. They look holy. And this man, now whether he was dressed differently that she could tell, I don't know. It doesn't say, but it makes me think of people that are considered and looked at as being holy, and people will give them perks, extra things. And I don't wear any kind of cloak or anything that would make me look different than anybody else, but some people know who I am, that I've translated the Bible, and they feel like, well, we're going to give him something a little bit extra. And I see that doesn't happen very often, but it does. So that's what happened to this man. And she says to the husband, we should indeed make to him a small upper room, mikron, micro, and we should put for him there a bed, cleaning, a recline comes from that, and a trapezon, trapeze comes from that, a table, and a chair, and a lampstand. I went to the island of Patmos years ago, went over to Greece, ended up on the island of Patmos, and was invited to go to the monastery to spend a couple of nights there, and got to hold and see the oldest gospel in existence from the 3rd or 4th century. While I was there, they took me up to my room, a little room right next to where the bells were that rang, and inside of there was a bed, a table, a chair, and a lampstand, and a window. Pretty basic. And guests, they would stay there, and that's where I went. Reminds me of this story. And then she says, and it will be in his coming to us that he shall turn aside there, go into the room. And a day came, and he entered there, and he turned aside into the upper room and went to bed there. And he said to Gehazi, his servant, now apparently this Gehazi goes along with him but doesn't necessarily live with him, serves him in different ways, and one way was keeping women away from him. Basically, he didn't talk to women, and they didn't touch him. He had nothing, no relations of any sort, sort of like the monastery on the island of Patmos. The men and all the brothers sat in one place, and when I went there, two of the ladies from the group that I was with were invited, and they came, but they had to sit separately in another room with the secretary of the abbot of the monastery. These men don't have dealings with women, more so even here. And he said, that is Elisha, to Gehazi, his servant, we'll call this Shunammite. And he called her, and she stood before him. So he's sitting there, and she comes in, And he said to him, Gehazi, so he didn't talk to the woman, say indeed to her, behold, you startled us with all this change of state, all these good things, this room and so forth is what she's talking about. What shall we do for you? And he asks, is there to you a word to say to the king? So here it shows that he is a very important person. He knows the king. Or to the ruler, and that would have been, I believe, Ahab. Or to the ruler of the force, a general. Anything we can do, because he has their ear. And she said, oh, I dwell in the midst of my people. I'm just living. I just do my own thing, more or less. And Elisha said to Gehazi, well, what must be done for her? He looks at him. Gehazi said, well, that all means the son's not to her, and her husband's old, presbytes, an elder. And he said, well, call her. And he called her. So he asked this after she left. So he called her, and she stood by the door. And Elisha said to her, at this time next year, about this hour, and living, you shall be holding a son. But she said, no, master, O man of God, you should not disappoint your bondwoman. And the woman conceived and bore a son at the same time, about the same hour, living, while she was living, as Elisha spoke to her. But things happen. And the boy matured, probably, I'm guessing, maybe 7 or 8. He wasn't big because they carry him in mentions, but he was old enough to go find the father in the farm. And it came to pass the boy went forth to his father, to the ones harvesting. And he said to his father, my head, my head. And his father said to the servant, well, carry him to his mother. And he lifted, so he was able to pick him up, and carried him to his mitera, maternal mother, and laid him down to rest upon her knees until midday. So he left early, and now he's come back, and he died. Kind of sad, isn't it? The woman didn't ask for the child, but yet God, Elisha was given to understand that she would love to have a child, and the miracle of the conception, the husband being old, and so she's frantic, and she's horrible. He dies in her hands, on her lap. Can't imagine how horrible that would be. And she bore him, and she rested him upon the bed of the man of God. That's interesting. She didn't walk away, cry, or whatever, but she took him and upstairs, carried him upstairs to the room, and locked the door after him and went forth. And she called her husband and said, send indeed to me one of the servants and one of the donkeys, and I shall run unto the man of God, and I shall return. And he said, why is it that you should go to him today? Interesting, she doesn't tell him that the child died. It's not a new moon or a Sabbath. It has nothing to do with this man of God. And she said, peace, quiet. And she saddled the donkey and said to her servant, you lead and go. Do not wait for me to mount. For if I said to you, go, then you shall go. She's upset. And shall come to the man of God in Mount Carmel. And she went and came unto the man of God in the mountain. And now it doesn't say how long this was. I'm not sure. And I didn't look on a map. Maybe I should have. And it came to pass, as the man of God saw her right opposite coming, that he said to Gehazi, his servant, oh, behold, a Shumanite. Now run to meet her. And you shall say to her, is peace to you? Is peace to your husband? Is peace to the boy? And she said, peace. And she straightened to the man of God in the mountain, and she seized his feet down on the ground, and she grabs his feet, and Gehazi approached to thrust her away. So same sort of with Jesus when he went to the uh, Samaria, the woman at the well, and when the men came back and found him talking to a woman, they were very surprised. So she frantically seizes his feet, hoping that he can do something for her problem of the dead child. And the man of God said to Gehazi, "Allow her, for her soul is severely pains her, and the Lord's concealed it from me, and announced it not to me." I don't know what's going on, Gehazi. And she said, "Did I ask a son from my master? Did I not say, 'Do not mislead me'?" And Elisha said to Gehazi, "Tie up your loin and take my staff in." So apparently he knew he died. "Your hand and go. And if you should find a man in the way, you shall not bless him. And if a man should bless you, you shall not answer to him." This is serious. You just keep going. "And you shall place my staff upon the face of the boy." So he knows that the boy has died. And the mother of the boy said, "As the Lord lives and as your soul lives, shall I leave you behind?" No, it wasn't enough that he sent Gehazi. So then Elisha rose up and went after her. He's now in control of the emotions of this woman, which a lot of men are. And I'm not saying that's bad or wrong, just the way life is. Women can have an effect on men, especially when they're upset in certain ways. Woo. And Gehazi went in front of them and placed the staff upon the face of the boy. And there was not a sound, and there was not a hearing anything. And Gehazi returned to meet him, Elisha, and he reported to him, saying, "Well, the boy is not arisen." And Elisha entered into the house, and behold, the boy, having died, was resting upon his bed. And Elisha entered and locked the door after the two of them. Now, the two of them would be the boy and Elisha, or would it be Gehazi and Elisha? I'm not sure. And he prayed to the Lord. Now, Jesus did the same thing. He went into the room where the daughter had died, and only certain ones were allowed with him. I think it was James and John. And he ascended, Elisha ascended and bedded down upon the boy, laid down on the bed, and put his mouth upon his mouth and his eyes upon his eyes. Now, I know some people are going to say, well, this was just, he blew into his mouth artificial respiration, not artificial, what do they call that? When you breathe into somebody else's mouth to resuscitate them. And his eyes upon his eyes, and his hands upon his hands. And he bent upon him and warmed through the flesh of the boy. He was dead for quite a while, because she had to go quite a ways. And he returned and went about the house this side and that side, walking around, and he ascended and bent down upon the boy 7 times. Jesus didn't have to do it 7 times, it's whammo. And the boy opened his eyes. And Elisha yelled out to Gehazi and said, "Call the Shunammite." And he called her, and she entered to him. And Elisha said, "Receive your son." And the woman entered and fell at his feet and did obeisance upon the ground. It mentions obeisance in the New Testament. We don't do that any longer, do we? Muslims do. And she took her son and went forth. Now, this is not the last place we hear of her. Later on, apparently her and her husband leave because of a drought and come back after a period of time, and we'll find out a little bit here what happens there with that. Now, the next story, well, let's go up and I'll just see what I came up with Moses was the woman conceives. I thought about the woman's flow, has control over the body of a woman here. And Jesus, with the woman, they had the flow and touched the hem of his garment when the flow stopped. And Elisha returned to Gilgal. And the famine was in the land. So now we got a famine going on. And the sons of the prophets sat down before him. And Elisha said to his servant Gehazi, "Stand by the great kettle and boil stew for the sons of the prophets." Okay, so Gehazi is going to be a cook. And he went forth into a field, that is Gehazi, to collect together herbs. And he found a vine in the field, and he collected together from it a wild gourd to fill his cloak. And he entered and put it into the kettle of the stew, but they did not know, and he poured out to the men to eat. And it came to pass in their eating, and looking down from out of the stew, that they yelled out and said, "Death is in the kettle, O man of God," and they were not able to eat. So sounds like Gehazi was about as good a cook as I am. Death is in the stew. I made some chocolate spaghetti. Oh, boy, was it terrible. I couldn't eat it. And I was like, I would rather have it be poison. But this man didn't know how to cook. Almost poisoned him. And Elisha said, "Will you take flour and put it in the kettle?" And they put. And Elijah said to Gehazi, "Well, pour out to the people and let them eat." And there was not a bad thing still in the kettle. Now, how it went left was a miracle. And a man came from out of, so now that was the next one, a miracle. So, healing the dead child in Matthew 18:26 with Jesus, heals the poisoned food. I had a hard time finding that, but I thought of the manna from heaven, which gives life to the people. God had control over the food. And then the next one, we're going to go in here, multiplies the loaves. So the 4,000 or 5,000 were fed by Jesus in the wilderness. And a man came from out of Val-Selisah, and he brought to the man of God first produce of 20 bread loaves of barley and dried clusters of figs. And he said, "Give them to the people and let them eat." And his minister, liturgos, a liturgy comes from that, said, "What should I give before this 100 men? There's only a little bit of food." And he said, "Give to the people and let them eat. For thus says the Lord, they shall eat and shall leave over." And they ate and left behind, according to the saying of the Lord, just as Jesus did when they picked up the leftovers on the ground. It was, 5 or 6 bushels full of food. The next video seminar, chapter 5, is on Naaman, the Syrian general, and really interesting story. We can learn a lot from this. Hope you'll join us in chapter 5. Until then, God bless.